Dear guests, dear participants of the Forum of Strategic Initiative, I welcome you at the session the Great Resettlement, Migrational Challenges of the Future, that will discuss important issues of the migrational problems. Let me introduce our speakers. First of all, we are having it in this hybrid format, and we have two online guests, two online participants. Sayasat Nurbek, Minister of Science and Higher Education. Sayasat, are you with us? Ruslan, I can hear you well. I hope you can hear me well. Hello from Almaty. The second speaker is also online, Kumar Aksakalov, the governor of the North Kazakhstan region. Yes, I am also here with you. Now let me invite the guests who are in the audience. Lyazzat Ibragimova, the chairperson of the joint stock company Olzhas Bank. Good morning, good day. And Erbol Tulegenov, the junior partner of CSI. And now let me move to our event itself. Today in the world, according to the assessment of the international experts, there are about 280 million international migrants, 3.54% of the whole population of the world, and every group of migrants, they have their own reasons to migrate to a certain country, but each migrant is looking for the better conditions for himself and for his close ones and relatives and loved ones. We understand that migration can give positive or negative impact. For some countries, migration gives opportunity to supply itself with new labor resources and gives impetus to the economic growth. According to some international experts, these migrants will generate over 9% of the amount of the world GDP, which is by 3 trillion more rather than they would stay in their own countries. At the same time, we understand there are significant risks that will lead to the mismatch and the disbalance to all markets, and also social tension as well as dissatisfaction among migrants and the local population. Thus, the significant effect is impacted by the migrational flow, social, economic, political, and today we see that the most attractive things are US and Germany. In US in 1970s there were 12 million international migrants to now, whereas now there are over 50 million migrants in Germany. In the last 10 years the turnover and migrants number has grown, reaching 12 million. In Kazakhstan in the last 20 years there are about 800,000 people coming. Of course we have a negative outflow of migrants more, and activation of migrational process with the Russian Federation. And now my first question is to the Governor of the North Kazakhstan region, Mr. Kumar Aksakalov. My question is, the forced migration from Russia will be over 1 million people. And my question is, what part of migrants settled in North Kazakhstan region? Were there timely excesses related to settling migrants on the territory of your region? Well, you know, in North Kazakhstan, region is a bordering region. It 7.5 thousand kilometers of the dry land between Russia and Kazakhstan, and we are accounting for 2.5 thousand kilometers of this border. We could see from 21st of September the sudden increase of people, over 92,000 Russian citizens crossed the border. 8,500 referred to one-stop shops to receive the individual identification number to be able to receive, to do the bank transactions, and 2,500 people who crossed the border, in 1 year, they were 1,300 people, and 600 received work permits. You know, according to the legislation, the citizens of Russia can be on the territory of Kazakhstan over 90 days. During these 90 days, they can be employed. If person likes to stay longer on the territory of our country, so to stay longer, more than 90 days, then refers for the permits. So we had 1,300 people who applied, and 600 of them received those permits. There were no excesses, and we could see the big wave and opened the front office not to create the lines and the crowds, and this was done very quickly. Therefore, saying that there were excesses or some sudden events, I cannot say, during the transition or during the resettlement, that was not mentioned. Dear Mr. Kumar, we understand that one of the important factors of attractiveness of the region in those conditions was the level of the social and economical level of the region, its engineering infrastructure.
And Mr. Kumar, the second question I would like to ask you, if there is the second wave of mobilization in Russia and relatively the second wave of migration, and the volumes will increase 2-3 times, how your region will be able to cope with such of flow of migrants, and what positive effects could be from inflow of migrants into your region, both for your region as well as for the state? Answering your question, probably I'd like to say that migration processes do not go without any footprints. Certainly there is impact on the prices on food and violation of the logical chains, as well as different risks. And huge inflation impacted on many countries that are integrated into the global economy because of the ongoing geopolitical confrontation as well. And we see that the international experts community, the crisis we experienced together, name the crisis that it doesn't look like any other crisis in the world. And it impacted many countries. And in October this year, in the US, inflation came to 7%. And high inflation was also fixed in England during 40 years. So this is the first year when inflation came to that high level. And migration processes certainly threaten to the global food security. And people are born more during the last 50 years. The number of residents in Earth increased actually twice. And yesterday we saw the information from the UN that they fixed the 8 billion residents of our Earth. And certainly they all need food. And we expect that by 2050 the population of Earth would come to 10 billion, and consumption of food products will increase more than by 70%. And repeating all this, I again say that they need food, they need drinking water, footwear, as well as clothes, and we set up the task to ensure the food security, first of all, and in the agro-industrial in complex as well as in plant growing. We increase the yields of vegetables, and also there is room to work in livestock breeding, and we cannot supply ourselves with the dairy products, and we import a lot of such products, and that's why now we decided to develop the dairy farms, and only this year we built 17 farms like that. We increased the processing industry, and there is a lot to do, and different related sectors are developed in industry, up to 400 million tenge pool for opening the jobs, and started to develop construction industry, and investments in construction industry increased 2.7 times, and these all are jobs. And what I am talking about, everywhere the workers are needed, and if the labor migrants under this scenario will move to our country, I think that we will be able to offer them jobs. And I think that from this task is doable. As for the infrastructure, we understand that during the first 2 days that are most critical when the people cross the border, your region, according to your forecast, will be able to survive, to cope with this issue. Yeah, we cannot say about the whole country, but we see that the rental payments increased and hotels are full now, and then everything became more or less okay, and we don't see huge border crossing now on a daily basis. We admit 2,000 people crossing the border on a daily basis. Okay, thank you. We will come back to you. Now are coming to the audience and understand that geopolitics as well as politics impact on the issues we consider now. I'd like to ask the question to Erbol Tulegenov, a junior partner in the Center of Strategical Initiatives. Tell us, please, how potentially the scope of migration from Russia can increase, and what is the migration from the southern countries to Kazakhstan, and what are the potential scopes of migration in the pessimistic scenario. Good afternoon, everybody. I represent CSI company. We do different researches, forecasts, and up to 2050, 2090, and we consider different scenarios. And if you are talking about danger from one-time crossing the border by migrants from Russia, and there will be another wave of mobilization, and now they mobilized 300,000 people, and yesterday the missile fell in the border with Poland, and if they announce another wave of mobilization, they recently forecast that in Russia, in the active conscript year in Russia, there are 13 million people. And if we take even older residents, then this amount will increase to 30 million. And 2.5 million people moved to Kazakhstan, and we also have ethnical 3.2 million ethnical Kazakhs who are residents of Russia, and they may move to Kazakhstan because of their relatives being residents of our country, and the 1 million people of conscript age may cross the border, may move to Kazakhstan. The worst scenario is that this will be one-time migration. On the one side, these are ethnical Kazakhs. On the other side, the people who moved from here will be also people who are close to us, and maybe infrastructure will not survive. And 100,000 Russians who moved to Kazakhstan was a challenge to us, and they rented the apartments. The prices for rental apartments increased, and it could be a collapse if the more people will move. And labor migrants from Central Asia, from 5 to 15 million people, if the living standards become worse in Russia and construction sites will be suspended, they will come to Kazakhstan for employment. And this could be 2 million people coming to us searching employment opportunities, and also could cause collapse. If we take the southern regions and look at Afghanistan with 40 million of population, and the situation is not sustainable there, in any minute this could be a civilian war, and they could move to Tajikistan, to Uzbekistan, and then finally find themselves in our country. And if we look at Syrian scenario, 30 million people escaped from Syria to Turkey, and 40 million of population, out of them 12 million may be distributed in 5 Central Asian countries, then Kazakhstan may see 20 million people coming to us. So million avoiding mobilization, 2 million are labor migrants who could also move to Kazakhstan, and then there will be 5.5 million people, including those who go from Afghanistan. This will be one-time migration, which will be a challenge for our country. If the migrants are IT specialists, they can be employed and can be beneficial for our economy, but the system should get prepared now already for such kind of events. We were experienced in 1940s when there was deportation, and a lot of people were forced to move to Kazakhstan. But I think that there should be a program, plan B, plan C for such kind of situations. Thank you, Erbol. You just touched a very interesting aspect, and I'd like to ask a question. You are talking about 5 million migrants in the future, and what is your forecast? Optimal population growth, because of the burn rate and birth rates increased and migration moved to our country, in order to make everything in accurate way. Let us take historical, what we were good in. In 1992, Kazakhstan admitted 180,000 people who found themselves beyond Kazakhstan and decided to return to their native country. There was a huge wave of resettlement of Oralman. Up to 2010, we admitted 170,000 migrants, and our economy was okay. We found jobs for them and built houses for them, helped to get education, and incorporated them into the system. Now there are 15,000 during the last 5 years. Repatriants of Kazakhstan are not big in number moving to Kazakhstan, and 12,000 people moving to Kazakhstan would be okay. And if we consider the foreign experience like US, they admit up to 1.5 million people by green cards. This will be 0.3% from the population of the US. 50,000 people will be 0.3%. We will be able to admit people. They should migrate in a smooth way, not in one time. And they the foreign countries classify the migrants like a reunion of relatives, and there is economic migration when they come for employment issues. Then there should be filtration in a maximum way to screen out the most qualified working force. And there are sponsorship, like Uzbekistan announced in news that for $1 million they may offer citizenship of Uzbekistan. And we also can attract money into the economy, offering them to buy our citizenship. And the population of by forecast of UN, by 2050 in Kazakhstan there will be 24 million of residents, and by 2100 there will be 32 million of residents. And if we look at the characteristics of the country, usually they see what is the population of the country, and intuitively they can assess the national security, defense capability, and economy. And as minimum, we need 50 million by 2100 and even earlier. And in general, in average, in Turkestan region, our average woman bears 5 kids. In northern regions, this birth rate is much lower, and the birth rate goes down, and as more developed the country is, the number of children in average family goes also down. But if we can employ, if we can offer education for the children, then the number of kids can increase up to 4, and we may come earlier to this 50 million population, or via migrants, via effective, thorough policy. We may attract migrants and increase the population of the country, and that is the forecast. Thank you, Erbol. Important is, and I agree, that we need to incentivize birth rate, creating the conditions, and we understand that the trend for urbanization is inevitable, unavoided, and we need to pay attention to the growth of territories and regions. And I think that in our new programs, the development of agricultural territories will be ensured, as far as birth rate in rural areas is much higher than in urban ones. And you touch the issue of qualified HR when we talk about migrants and their inclusion into the current economic system. And let us switch to other issues. Let me address the next question to Mr. Sayasat, Minister of Science and Higher Education of Republic of Kazakhstan. Tell us, please, under conditions of increasing competition for the qualified HR, do we cope with the migration being employed in the schools, in higher educational establishments? Is there any mechanism to build them in to our educational system? Whether is there any interest from Russian universities to faculty of these universities to move to Kazakhstan? Thank you very much. I am sitting in the airport waiting for my flight to Astana. And at the beginning, let me briefly add my comments into the previous statements. I agree that we need to look at migration issues from the demographical point of view. And our situation related to demography is very, very bad. And we expect 400,000 be born last year. And pandemic had its positive aspects. And record of the 20th century was in 1970 when we had a record in birth rate, and it became lower as far as the generation that was born in 2001, and in 2000 we had very few or low birth rate. We in general may say that in the regions, in the Central Asian region, UN noted 8 billion of Earth's population. We, during 12 years, were able to step from 7 billion to 8 billion of population. And we also need to look wider at these issues, distinguished delegates, so that in India, in Bangladesh, there is huge demographic peak, and in the beginning of the next year, there will be another peak. And we need to feed the people, educate them, as well as to get them closed. And Ruslan, I am switching to your question. We see that the pressure on the system of education starts to grow, not only internal pressure, but also external as well. I am working as minister for the 4th year and see that this is quite a challenge for our country. 620,000 students we have now in our universities, and by 2030 we expect that there will be 1 million of students, not only because of the internal migration but also external migration. Students from Bangladesh, India, and etc. studied historically in Ukraine. Now we became the hub of that mobility, and there is outflow of our citizens who look for new options, new hubs for their continuation of education, not only of our citizens but citizens of other countries. And this was just a crisis that is certainly very hardly regulated as far as this is one-time migration.
Unfortunately, it's 70s of the last century. In 1974-75, Karaganda University with its 70 hectares, 50-60 years, there were no investment into the academic structure. And current universities, they are squeezed in fast-growing infrastructure. And this year, we had a big problem with the dorms. If in the past we had dormitories and usually 3 weeks would be some loud, but then this was oozed out. But today we have about 80,000 seats and beds shortage. Almaty, Shymkent, in high concentration of universities in Almaty. And now, taking your question, yes, in such crisis situation, we have a very good, unique even opportunity, once in a lifetime generation opportunity. It means a big number of researchers and scientists, top ones of Russian, Ukrainian universities are looking for the opportunities to continue their researches, their academic career in other universities, including in our region. They view Kazakhstan. We have dialogue, very cautious dialogue with many of such researchers. It will be done decentralized through our universities. They will be invited as host, as guest lecturers, and then as scientific research workers for our labs. And if we prepare ourselves properly, Kazakhstan in the nearest 3-5 years will be able to get into the strong regional hub of mobility. This year, Kazakhstan co-chairs the Bologna process, Bologna refugee and Bologna follow-up, and we announced in October creating Central Asian space of the higher education on the principle of Bologna process that will allow quickly integrate universities and increase the attractiveness of our higher education. We actively start and invite foreign universities. Mr. Kumar didn't mention that Arizona University opened in his region, and for the first time we saw interesting 6 other regions of Kazakhstan sent students. I talked to many parents. Taras, Shymkent, we are receiving very interesting internal migration. We are actively working with European and American University, Michigan, the Hellas top Scottish high-ranking university next year will be open its branch in the October State University. And the third important point, we shall actively start digitalization, officially let and allow online education, officially started. There was a legislative loop and ban which we have lifted, and it requires resources, and this hybrid format will be popular. And taking your question, Ruslan, yes, there are high risks, but there are also high chances. If we do everything properly, in the next 3-5 years, Kazakhstan and overall Central Asia can become the serious hub academic mobility, as it was done in Qatar, Emirates. Thank you, thank you. I hope that exactly what would happen, and I continue while you are still in touch with us. We shall very carefully track demographic trends. According to our forecast, the number of people who are on the labor market will be increased due to the high birth in 2000, and by 2030, additionally, there will be 1.5 million people additionally on the labor market. So my question is, Sayasat, if we do the reforms, high-scale reforms that it was discussed, do we have enough own human labor resources, or do we need migration flow? We often use that highly qualified migrants are coming. We also have CVs, and I see their high qualification. And to your mind, what are the occupations and professions that are most in demand? Thank you very much for the answer. Government is preparing itself. Also, now there are certain stages of the migration policy concept. Very interesting document. 30 big initiatives. A lot that was discussed is reflected. 250,000 per ton. The talent visa, to have talent visa that is successfully used in US. We have a visa for teachers and professors and researchers. It's a separate educational initiative. So now officially document is not accepted, so I cannot make official reference to it, but this concept has very interesting tools that will allow to focus and quickly attract the resources, human resources with the technical and other skills that we are short of. Ministry in its strategy is doing the following. First, we are, since next year, start developing the advanced preparation of human resources. Last 5 years I was doing atlas of new occupations, and now we see regional maps. We want every region to receive its map, identify the skills and competences that are required for the regional economy, could see the shortage and deficiency that is existing, and would start then prepare staff at the national universities or through the migrants. There is a shortage of technical staff, technical people. We have lost in the 90s engineers and technical experts, and also the state contract, 112,000 only learn to be engineers out of 600. It's 36%. And we increased the number of grants. 88,000 we gave us. 60% we gave to the engineering technique. This shortage of the human resources in 2-3 years will be felt. 2-5 years we'll try to fill in our markets and our universities with engineering and technical staff. And those people who are looking for relocation, maybe this is something to look into. Thank you very much, Sayasat. I understand that you have a flight to go to catch up. We will not keep you any longer, but if you could stay, we'll be very happy. Meanwhile, since we touch students and the youth, my question to Mr. Kumar Aksakalov. Mr. Kumar, are you with us? Yes, I am with you. I would like to ask you, since we talk about the young people and their supply, for the brain drain, to stop the brain drain from the region, what do you do? How do you improve the attractiveness of the region? It's not our future, it's our present, I would say. What do you do to stop the brain? Yes, you are absolutely right. Unfortunately, we have negative dynamics for many years. We are losing labor resources and young people who graduate schools traditionally for many years, up to 30%, would go out of the country, out of the region, and they would go to this would be young people who have very good knowledge. They would go to Russian universities. If we talk about Russian, since January, there was a policy of inviting students to their universities, and they would invite the best graduates with the best knowledge from our country. 5 years ago, jointly with the ministry and jointly with the government, we started to increase the number of grants, first of all for our university, for our regional university, and the number of grants increased 2.5 times. As of today, thanks to the work of increasing grants, 70% of the graduates of schools are staying, and the number of students who are living outside of the country decreased twice. We see about 15% of the graduates of schools, they left the country borders. Secondly, we adopt regional Qizilzhar Jastara. It's a subsidized mortgage, which can be is for quasi-state sector and law enforcement agency staff. This is also significant. And the other projects that I was mentioning in agriculture, the plants and the factories, all of them are to create the employment opportunities for young people. Thank you very much. Now let's move to the most difficult question of the last month. It's accommodation, housing. I think this is the most difficult one. Today in Almaty is difficult to go because there are no hotels or expensive hotels. Lyazzat Ibragimova, you probably understand that I'm shifting to you. We all know the prices have increased. Partly they went down, but it was the first wave. We hope it stays at the same level, but the prices we see are high. They didn't go back to the previous level and most likely won't do so. So if 2-3 times more people would come and migrate, Kazakhstan does have any reserve of the housing reserve. Thank you. According to the government for citizens data, we have 6.3 million house owners. So let's 19,000 people, 6.3 house owners. The statistics is not bad. If we have 10 million economically active citizens, it means 60% are house owners. This is a good result for the 30 years of independence. And then if we go deeper into the structure, 5.6 million, about 90% is the only house, is the only accommodation. And the question that journalists like to ask me as Olzhas, how many people have more than 717,000 can be considered the middle class? They have more than 2 apartments, and out of them 2 apartments, 606, 84,900 people have 3 registered apartments, 16,501 they have 4, 5 houses, 4,006 apartments, 900 people, and 972 people have 7 apartments, and then there is a downward dynamics. However, there are people, and about 147 who are unique, who have 20 and more apartments registered, 147 people. And if we make a simple analysis, about 1.4 adults have create family with this ratio, and 4.3 million families, they own these 6,300,000 apartments. There are also houses, and all houses on rural territories. When I talk, everyone thinks it's like apartments and or apartments in the regional centers. No, it's all over the territory, all villages that you were born and left. When you were born, they were 9,000. Now there are 4,000, excluding myself. For example, I grew in the village of the town type, and according to our estimates, about 1,200,000 free apartments, but there are grown-up children who can live separately from parents, and 80% of this pool and 80% of time when they are rented out on the market, we have 450,000 apartments which could be presented. I opened Krysha and I opened 52,000 advertisements that houses are for rent. I think Erbol is right. This one of arrival created some panic, and they were very they were able to pay, and they came to big cities, Nur-Sultan, Almaty, Shymkent, Petropavlovsk, Uralsk during the first batch, like bordering cities, and their payability also created this demand, high demand. And there is a question, how many apartments do they rent? According to our estimates, no more than 50,000-60,000 apartments. Is it more or little? Is it much or little? According to the estimates in Kazakhstan in 2020, 84,000 Kazakhstan citizens were studying abroad. It's a very good 626 students, and about 12% are. So imagine all students just came back home and would create this demand for the housing, for the property. I think the market is getting steady. There were many cases when the houses were not sold, not for the sale, because rent became more attractive. However, we shall also understand the country can cope maximum 1 million migrating people. The rest will create, I would say, the systematic failures. There will be excessive shortage of resources, and we will experience and feel it, and it will turn into social pressure. Thank you. Thank you. That's why organizers decided to hold such a dialogue. We shall all evaluate the potential risks and understand what we need to be ready for. I asked about the first 48 hours because you need to provide housing and food, so there is no tension with the local populations that can affect and impact negatively. To continue housing and property subject, part of the migrants come and leave. Kazakhstan in this case is a transit destination for them, but migrants who already moved and who are living here, if they stay, if they given the fact our demographic situation and the growth of the population, we understand that in the current format, our current social engineering infrastructure is at the edge of its ability and possibilities. It doesn't provide what citizens need. For example, in Astana, the problems with heating, that there is not enough capacity for proper heating. And if migrants stay and more would come, do we need to review housing policy? Do you think how much we shall build annually, because the market is growing? If you look at the Krysha KZ, there are a lot of agents. Most likely there are no 50,000 advertisements, and market is smaller and narrow. How much do we need to build so there is enough for our citizens and migrants who would also become our citizens? It's a good question, Ruslan. I think we shall understand the upper strategic level. We are at the strategic level forum today, and we shall ask ourselves the next question. Not what would happen in 7 years. In 7 years, I know I will be 57 years. My granddaughter will go to the kindergarten. I'll try to find a good education. My younger son will finish school and will enter university. And the question that we as a nation and as a state shall ask, what shall happen in 50 years? What we've done in 20 years?
And actually, you wrote the great resettlement of nations and migration challenges. Great resettlement of nations was at the beginning of 1990s. And from Kazakhstan, we had outflow of 4 million people. And Erbol said only to the Russian Federation, 2.5 million people were gone. And this was great resettlement, and we always had great migration process, and we just redone our policy for migration, and during 30 years there was huge restart of the whole population. I grew in the north of Kazakhstan. In 1993, I got married. It was Yerementau sub-region, a village where actually the 90% of whom were ethnical Germans, and certainly the whole village spoke the Russian language. And I recall that we admitted the aircraft of our resettled people, ethnical Kazakhs, who asked the question, why everybody spoke Russian language? That was the challenge for them, that they were flying to Kazakhstan expecting to speak Kazakh language, and they were immersed in the Russian language. And certainly we need the migration policy where the housing policy will become a part of that migration policy. And the first question we still cannot answer: are we for the urbanization? Raise your hands who thinks that in Kazakhstan there should be 3 million cities and 90% of the population should reside in the cities. Raise your hands. And you should not raise your hands because this will happen. Yes, it will. And according to our computations, we see that urbanization process is going on, and the number of internal migration flows of population to Almaty and Astana, and mortgage loans are issued in these cities as far as there is huge demand for that. And what we would do with the rural population? We will resettle them and offer social lifts for their resettlement and give the access to the good quality medicine. And I think that we didn't work in this area, and these young guys in January events were going along the streets and saw the citizens of Kazakhstan that could pay for their dinner the amount they are paid for the whole month. And this was the reason of the January events. And the index, which grows from year to year, and there is huge gap. And the president is talking about the social justice, and the normal researches should be done in the social, economic, and during the last 3 years, I don't see such kind of research in the market. Although you are the director of the economic research institution, I am the leader of the bank, and I also don't see this. I am now dealing with the families with many children. We are the only bank that provides loans to such families, the loans, and we make them owners of the housing. And about 80% of cases of the loan beneficiaries are females who grow the kids in the families with single parents, and they go to Shymkent, Almaty, Astana. And certainly when we see the assistance is provided by the relatives who are co-beneficiaries or co-borrowers of such kind of mortgage loans, and they create then stories how they are settled in these big cities. And when you ask me how much housing should be built, and I answer at the level at which the leaders of the country are answering, and we have 198 square meters be built for such families, and up to standards we need to build 180 million square meters of housing. But when we in the last year started to build 14 million square meters, we already got the pressure. We already had a lack of thermal energy, lack of water supply, and the issue was increased about the density of such kind of buildings in the big cities. And migration is very closely related to the social behavior of people, how we will build the internal migration. In Kazakhstan, the people will be felt how they are integrated into the social institutions. And now I see that we undervalue the problems of the youth, and we may say to the municipalities, and we now implement the program Almaty Jastari, where we give 70% of priorities to the youth and give loans to 15 million people with 10% of the initial contribution, and for 15,000 of positions in the program we get 40,000 of applications. Look at this demand. And I suffer also for the internal migration that shows now huge language difference. When we work with southern regions, then the population is fully Kazakh speakers, and they have their own Instagram, their own media characters, and believe me, we are not there. We are not among such kind of characters. They have practically different agenda. And in the north of Kazakhstan, in the central city, which is administrative capital, something looks quite different here. The Russian language environment, most of the fora are in the Russian language, and I am confident that in the comments in YouTube will be 10% of such comments why our speakers do not speak the Kazakh language. And such a problem also should not be ignored. We need to understand that we build Kazakhstan of future, and we all will be living together, and the language should be chosen. And I am for transition into the switch to Latin alphabet, which will help us to build a house. And Timur was giving nice allegory that we will build the new house. There should be the internal charisma for different rooms, and the most important thing is that in this multi-storied building of our Kazakhstan there should be social lifts. We need to offer to any child who is in a small city, in a rural area, or maybe not in the elite school, because of his talents, should be able to move to the upper floors, and then we will get such a state. And I'm talking now about the 10th challenge, that we are changing the system of self-governance. I always ask how you will change it, for whom you will do it. And it's good that forum took place. And coming back to the housing policy, I may say that housing is the basis of security of humans, and birth is the upper trust to the government. When a female says, I will bear in this state A, second, she sees the male for whom she will bear, and she sees the future of the state, that in 20, 30 years here there will be nice living standards. And at the level of the strategy we need to plan this. And I liked very much today the right thesis from Olzhas, that even bad plan is much better than lack of any plan. That's why we need to have a plan for the nearest 50 years, including plans for the housing construction. How many million square meters of construction there should be, and huge demand is, and a lot of experts say that in the country the mortgage boom bubble is in the country, but in Europe this indicator is more than 20%, and in our country huge number of underfinanced tools for mortgage, and a huge number of young people are willing to participate in the program. But we have two problems. First, lack of good mortgage products with the low initial contribution, and second problem is low paying capacity and demand. And for revenues we need to organize another conference in this room. Thank you. I would like you to show in the screen a poll, and via QR you should vote. And my request will be, and we now discuss the issues related to the construction, I would like to make a focus on the second word, we. And this is an important pronoun and important message. Only getting united, we will be able to build this house. As far as one is not a warrior, and it is not real to build a house by individuals, and if we do not have engineering infrastructure, and we faced this not long ago. Yesterday I just observed the situation in housing complex Madrid. Without heating system certainly would be terrible. And meanwhile we have another question to you, Ms. Lyazzat, to follow up your recent words. Are you planning to use some new tools? In Majlis there is a law, and there are amendments done in the housing relations, and within the framework thereof we'd like to change approach conceptually, and there are very many disputes. And as you know, we have 300,000 people as co-founders, and we did calculations and saw that more than 2 million people need the housing, and there are categories of citizens that are enabled to participate in such grace programs. And municipalities that distribute the lines in such programs would like to switch to give this function to Odbasi Bank in order to build the digital portrait of the families, what generation, how many apartments are in ownership, in order to build the fair lines for such kind of loans. But there should be long-term program within the framework of which we may announce that 25 years we will allocate such kind of financial resources, and annually 25,000 families will improve their housing conditions. And now each year we depend on the capabilities of the Republican budget, how different programs are formed, and relatively I may say that disadvantages of this strategic planning do not allow to talk that a big number of interesting big housing programs may be offered. At the same time, we are active at the level of regions and say to the governors to do some corporate programs together. Certainly we will not be standing still. There are very many young people, and huge demand is for ownership of real estate. And thank you very much. I'd like to summarize and repeat several ideas. Number one is the consequences of demographic booms of 2000 we feel now, as far as in the higher educational establishments we see a lot of graduates of high schools, and my son also is a student, and I may say that our educational establishments are not ready to such inflow of students, and this workforce in 4 years will be in the labor market, and how our markets will be able to absorb that number of graduates, and the quantity will grow from year to year. And these demographical forecasts are in great need, and we already said that in the next year the situation will be that scientific methods will be able to be used for demographical forecasts for years ahead. As far as without it we cannot move on. We need to understand how many we need for such population, and from that the migration flows will be forecasted, and more important, how many financial resources should be invested in the construction of housing, infrastructure development, and sector of services that will ensure the quality of living. And here we need to take into consideration the trends for urbanization and agricultural areas, whether there will be any residents in rural areas, and this is good. We need to create conditions for quality living standards for them, and we should not do such things without any thinking process in order not to fail there. And from there, the budget policy also will be built. We need to take into consideration the challenges, not only the budgets. And the second aspect, we need to take into consideration and understand that migration pressure that we see now gives also positive aspects, like businesses take additional clients that are with good paying capacity. And now we see that migrants who came to our country are with good paying capacity. And if there will be inflow of less the migrants with a lower paying capacity, then we need to get prepared for Plan B, Olzhas was speaking about. We need to understand this. And the third advantage is from the perspective of any employer, and each of us faces this competition in the labor market. We see that the qualified working force is in deficiency, and a lot of employers talk about that. And the qualified workforce is coming to our country, and this is good. And what is important, I'd like to say that when there was that inflow of migrants, and our population demonstrated hospitality and tolerance. This also should be noted, and everybody in the room positively perceived this, and actions of our citizens that helped the migrants. We all understand this. And important moment also is we need to get prepared for Plan B as well. And we discussed this before. And everything depends on our being ready, how we will behave further on. Then we may get in a maximum positive aspects that will allow us to get positive economic growth and improve the conditions for our citizens. So this is the summary. And for finalizing, I'd like to give the floor to organizer of the forum. Olzhas, the floor is yours. By that the session is over and the forum is over, I'd like to express appreciation to all those who stay with us till the end. And in the first session, there is no room and there are no vacant seats. And with the next session, fewer and fewer people stay with us. That's why the appreciation is expressed to you who stayed with us until the end. And the forum, we invited a lot of guests to, like Timur Suleymanov, Serik Zhemagan, Baghdad Musin, and Kumar Aksakalov, Lyazzat Ibragimova, and others.
Erkan Tukumov, Yerzhan Saltabayev, Ruslan Sultanov. They are all specialists in their field, and I would also like to mention that I personally have trust to their competence and to the values of those people. Kumar Aksakalov, he's showing very good results in North Kazakhstan region, and with his good support, we had a project on opening branch of the double diploma in Arizona University and North Kazakhstan University. If not Kumar Aksakalov, this university wouldn't happen, because we first went to Shymkent. They received very badly. Then we went to North Kazakhstan, and they wanted just to do it for the tick and forget about Kazakhstan. But Kumar Aksakalov showed wonderful presentation of the region and the university, and they decided to stay in Kazakhstan. Therefore, on Timur Suleimenov, he showed a good example, shared a good example. When we were preparing behind the curtains, he told me to remove any passes to his work, say that he's just a modest civil servant. And today you've heard people, you've listened people to whose values and professionalism I entrust them. There were also different companies, and I would like to thank Timur Turlov for becoming general partner of the forum KSL, BTORG, Association of the Armed Forces, Alash Media Group, Tengin News, Massaget, Atomiken Business, Nige KZ, Exclusive Capital, all of them supported this forum, and we invited to this forum two well-known people, Nassim Talebov and James Robinson. With Nassim, I met at the Astana Economic Forum, and we met, and I asked him a number of sharp questions, and his agent told me, Nassim, that is quite capricious. He doesn't, that he chooses forums. If there is no trust to the organizers of the forum, he wouldn't participate. And the circumstances were successful. So we had previous meeting, probably that was lucky, and all of this forum is pierced with the sincerity. There is no on-duty performance or official things. I hope this forum was useful, and I hope that we see each other again next year. Thank you all. Thank you. Goodbye.